It's 5 and we're live. And welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, reality our realm, set as we see it and frankly as well. I'm Joe Spina along with Paul Kiley and the Honorable, you notice you're not honorable, Paul, Darren Sear.
Hey, can you go back to that picture of Joe? Just with
Of
the,
who?
So, Joe, you're
golf
supposed to be whispering because you're on the golf course.
Oh, really?
You know how that works, right?
They're on the 18th.
Well, they open up shortly, except for one problem. Snow woes. And let's put that up there. We have some real snow woes. Nothing, but nothing tests the new administration more than 3 northeasters dumping a bunch of snow over the past few weeks. So what do you think? How did the new administration do separating the snow from you? I ask you, Council President, what do you think?
I think he did a really great job, to be honest with you.
Hey, what about you? I mean, it's a measurement.
So I have some interesting thoughts on just the whole premise of the snow cleanup and responsibility and blame and how the job is done. So first of all, there's how many different contractors are actually doing the snow removal? Hundreds, right?
Oh, yeah.
Across the city?
Right.
Some do a good job, some maybe lift their blades, some get right down.
Yep.
You know, there's all kinds of factors going on. And I'll just tell you that in my neighborhood, I live right on a corner, nice rounded corner, and the last snowstorm, the trucks were pushing the snow right back. They pushed it right up against my fence, so it was blocking the sidewalk. So I had to like run my snowblower through a snowbank as opposed to just going through the driven snow, right?
So what you're saying is they're actually pushing the snow
well into the sidewalk.
onto the curb and
right. So and then this past one, G&J, there were 4 G&J, and they were all G&J trucks. And when I was going around to do it, and this was pretty much after the snow had done all of its falling, they hadn't touched the sidewalk. They did it. I mean, it was beautiful. All I had to do was just
how
clear.
close did they get to the curb?
Perfect.
Really?
They kept it off the street and off the sidewalk.
How do you explain that, Paul?
It's just a matter of people.
Who's doing it?
Some guys are better at it. Maybe my neighborhood one time got somebody who's new at it. You know, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it, right?
But overall, I mean, very seriously, if a ward council or a mayor goes up against a bad snowstorm, does a bad job, everybody bitches.
And let me tell you, we had to close Bliss for 2 days because of this, and it wasn't so much because of the roads as much as it was because of the Ellis Street lot. They use it, people are parking there because of the snow emergency, so they can't clear it. So we actually had to close for 2 days.
Yep.
And you can't blame administration for that.
No, we had a lot of snow. I want to caution you folks out there that we're still tinkering with the call situation. We're going back to the old methodology, and if you make a call at the number here, 781-780, what is it, 9460, we'll put you up on we'll be reading it. We'll be on the scripted out. So you're going to have to play a little differently until we get the things ironed out.
So can I just make another observation about the snow? At Gliss where I work, people working from Lynn, from outside the city and so forth. And I had somebody from Peabody say to me that Peabody is usually nice and clean. This time it was terrible, and when I got to Lynn it was great. That's what they said, right? Mm-hmm. And somebody from Swampscott said, they never do a good job in Swampscott, and as soon as I get to Lynn, it's great. This time, Swampscott was as bad as always, and when I got to Lynn, it was bad.
And on top of it, Swampscott lost power.
So did a lot of people in Lynn. Yeah. But my point is that it's all a perspective thing.
Right.
Everybody is impacted by it, so there's going to be a lot of noise about it. Darren, as a ward councilor, knows how he gets those same calls every single time.
That's the point.
Right.
I think that they did it, personally, I think they did a terrific job. I was out and about in no time.
Yep. I can tell you this, that 8 o'clock on Tuesday night, the streets were down to hot top. And then we had a strong band of snow that came in, dropped an additional 3 inches of snow on the ground. So that's why on Wednesday morning, you saw some areas where the streets were pivoted. So what they wound up doing was they went out and they treated the streets with chemicals. So by noontime, everything was pretty much back down to the hot top. But every single community, because I had to drive from Lynn to Woolman, And Lynn was as good, if not better, than Saugus, Stoneham, Wakefield, and Woburn. And those are smaller communities, and the smaller communities seem to do a little bit better job. They have more control over what's going on their streets with their equipment. But I can say this, that the last 4 or 5 storms, that the team that's in place with the response people that are doing the conference call to the DPW, everybody seems to be working really well together. And the ward councilors seem to be, and even the at-larges, a lot more involved into what's going on in the city with the plowing. So they're actually out there from the start of the storm, even before the plows get on the road, till well after. The
How
plows
much
are
do
done.
you think technology has helped in managing these storms? Because I've never seen them so accurate, the meteorologists, as
Right.
they have been.
The only
helps,
storm
doesn't
they
it?
messed up on was Christmas.
That's, yeah. You're
That's
right.
the only storm, because we weren't supposed to get anything. We wound up getting about 4 or 5 inches, and it came within a matter of an hour. So,
Question, how many inches before the plows go out? Different communities have different standards.
it's usually 4 or 5 inches, and it's dependent on the storm that's coming. So they start, the big thing now with snow removal, and they started doing it, I think Jay Fink was one of the first
Right.
commissioners that we had that started doing, is treating the roads with chemicals before the storm starts. So the first few inches that come down are actually melting, and then they start to call in which all the contractors, as you were just saying, they don't like that because they're getting called in later and they're not making as much money.
Exactly, yeah.
And another thing to keep in mind is like clearing out the parking lots, like the off-street parking, and the decision about whether to send the plows out or not is decided by what the expectation is. If they
Right.
think it's going to be 3 inches of snow,
They don't send
they
it.
don't call.
That's
right.
right.
And they just treat.
Right.
And,
That's right.
you know.
Let's
anyway.
get a few snow facts up there. And this is kind of telling, so you guys can comment on that. Folks, our number here is 781 780-9460 if you want to pine in. So the budget, and you explained this to me, Council President, $780,000 was budgeted for 218. When was that budgeted for snow removal?
In the last administration.
So
back
In the
in-
last administration?
July-
Right,
for
and-
July
and
1st of last
and
year.
What the history of all the past administrations is they always under budget.
That's true in most municipalities. But the question I'm asking is, was that for 217 and 218? The
Yeah,
780,000?
well, it's for the upcoming year. So it goes from July 1
Right, to
till
July.
July 1 of 2018.
Okay.
So in 2018, this year, this July 1, the money that's budgeted is for fiscal year 19.
But the important thing to understand is that on July 1st of last year, there was no need for snow removal all the way up
Right.
until late
True.
November. or
But you
whatever.
can
But it
only
was-
use that
but
money.
nevertheless, they-
You can only use that money for snow removal purposes.
That's true, but it was 780,000 for this season, for the whole snow season. That's
Right.
my point.
Right.
Yep.
But the real cost is 2.5 million.
On average.
So it's underfunded
Right.
by better than 2 to 1. I mean, I'm sorry, 3 to 1, right? Or roughly 3 to 1.
It's on a wing and a prayer, and not just Lynn.
Right.
Every single community in the Commonwealth.
And you balance it with the reserve account, right?
Right.
That's,
Well, you can't do that anymore when you have to go out and bond $14 million.
Right.
You know, that's a different issue now. Because you're talking about a shortage here
Right.
of, what, 1.7 million?
Yep.
All right. Now, in all fairness to the new administration, Tom McGee, he's pledged, and correct me if I'm wrong, he's pledged to make sure that it's going to be fully funded from
Right.
here on in.
Yep.
That
Well,
correct?
Yeah.
It's an interesting challenge because, as Darren points out, if he budgets $2.5 million to fully fund it, and you have a mild winter and you only spend $1.5 million, you can't use it for something else, right?
It comes back into the general fund.
Then you have to do a supplemental, though, in order to use it for
Right.
anything else.
That's an
Now,
interesting
let's
point.
suppose that we have a winter like we had in 2015, where we went, we spent over $5 million. So you can't predict exactly what kind of winter you're going to have, whether it's the Farmer's Almanac or anybody else. So that's why everybody underfunds it in hopes that we don't have a severe winter. There was one year, a couple of years ago, where I was playing golf every Friday, all through the winter. It was
Right.
50 degrees out, and I don't think we had one ice storm or anything.
And back in 2011, we had those 4 snowstorms like back to back to back to back. Remember when the roof collapsed at
Right,
Bliss?
yep. That was 2015 and
But let me ask you,
2014.
let me
No,
ask
that was
both of you a
2011.
critical question here,
Right after
because
I
it's
saw it.
Oh,
fascinating
okay,
to
you're
me.
right, I'm sorry.
So if you make the budget for 2.5 million,
Yep,
and you have a mild winter,
yep.
that money gets thrown into, it doesn't get spent, it gets thrown into fast forward for the next year. Does he allocate another 2.5 million, so now the kitty is 5 million?
No, no,
Doesn't work that way.
no.
That would make sense though, wouldn't it?
In a way it would, because what you're doing is, but
Yeah.
you're gonna need that money somewhere else.
So-
So that money would probably go back into the reserve.
So you're making a guess as to how much it's going to cost.
Yep.
You just told me that one year it was 5 million.
But
And
you know what?
215.
You're
But that
making-
was when we had 140 inches of snow.
So here's the thing, you know, flattening out the average cost is kind of a thing that you think about. Like, we self-insure our health insurance, right? And so some years we get socked with the health, you know, the loss ratios. The numbers are really high, right? And other years they're really low. Over a 10-year period, if you figure out what the average is, you should be setting aside that much money,
Right.
that average every year. So some years you'll be over, some years you'll be under. But over 10 years, if you fund it the same way every year, you'll always have the
But
money.
if
And
you
that's that
spend the
point.
reserve, you're doing yourself no favors.
Right.
Right, and that's what every administration has done in the past.
Right.
So Pat did it, Chipper did it, Albie did it, I mean, Marino did it.
Yeah,
So-
with McGee's thinking of trying to be more in
Proactive.
line with-
More
proactive
business-like.
and have long-term strategies. This is how he needs to do it. He needs
Right.
to basically say, we average spend $2.5 million a year over the next 10 years. So for the next 10 years, I have to budget in total $25 million for
And
snow.
factor in inflation.
And don't worry about when it gets used. It'll
Right.
just get used eventually.
But we have to
I-
worry about a break.
I-
We'll be back shortly. Stay tuned.
That was-
Welcome to Lynn Community Television, your local media center. Here, we have great resources and staff to help create your own content.
Hi, I'm Jim Carrigan, host of The American Dream. I'm also a member of Lynn Community TV. And I want to encourage everybody out there who's not a member of Lynn Community TV to join the group. We have a lot of fun down here. The studio is new and it's in fabulous
Things
condition.
provided to our members are state-of-the-art studio, video and audio equipment, editing space, and a full-on training session with a staff member.
I've been involved in access television for over 20 years. Our shows have gone out to tens of thousands of people in local communities and millions throughout the world. Come on down, learn how to use the equipment to promote whatever it is you're doing.
For more information, please visit our website at www.lyntv.org, give us a call, or come on down to the station at 181 Union Street in Lynn.
And we're back with some more facts about snow. Did you know that to date, you mentioned 100 feet, 100 inches rather, of snow. That's unbelievable. This year, we've already had 57 inches of snow, which on average is 13 inches higher. Normally, in Lynn, we get 44 inches per year on average. So we exceeded that.
Right.
The other factor, folks, is, believe it or not, I'm looking at the golf course, we only get 11 snow days a year, but we're getting a few more than
But
that.
you know what's really interesting is, and I was thinking about this, you know, we got what did we get, 18 or 20 inches
20 inches in
a
the
couple
snow.
days ago, right? But it was really thin. If it was a wet snow, it would have been 12, right?
Right.
And then we had the storm before that. It was all really wet snow, and we got like 6 or 7 inches. And if it was
That was the
powdery,
hardest
we
storm
would
to
have had
manage.
15.
Right.
So you can't really even, the inches really is
That's
like a
true. That's an
misnomer.
interesting point, yeah.
That's one thing. And the other thing is the timing and whether or not it's going to be, it freezes right before or right after, whether it affects the commute, whether it affects the kids. So many things that come into play, and not one storm is alike another storm. And you have to think about it individually. You have to make decisions based on the circumstances on the ground.
But what's fascinating to me is the freezing is 32 degrees, right, Fahrenheit? and it was 38 degrees out yesterday.
Right.
Everything was melting.
Yep.
6 degrees is a
Yep.
big difference.
We
with the
lost,
sun.
we lost a
the
lot of
sun's out.
snow today.
Yeah, and what, it was about 45 today, into the
Yeah.
40s today?
Yep.
Yep.
So that saved our bacon in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And they're talking, I hate to say it, another storm next week now.
Don't start. It's costing me money because they call off school
Yeah.
and there goes my tutoring.
Yeah.
Anyway, to my Irish friends, they're Irish folks. I am not. Although my children are partially Irish. Happy St. Patrick's Day. A few facts about St. Patrick's. First of all, the first parade was not in Ireland. What do you think it was?
Boston.
You're very bright. Huh? Look at this guy. It was in Boston.
I'm Irish.
In 1730.
And he was there then.
Yeah.
He was,
What are you, 3/4 Irish?
Yeah, 3/4.
And you're 3/4 Irish.
yeah, something like
French, Greek.
that. I've never done that, you know,
The test?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it the same day that
I can
Pocahontas
tell you
does
this, I
it.
like beer and I like Irish bread, so I must
Wow.
be Irish.
Anyways,
And whiskey.
it's fascinating that it was in Boston in 1377, but it became an official parade day, which is the big one, in New York City, in 1766, which is actually before a revolution. The first parade in Ireland, folks, listen to this one, was in Waterford in 1903. And Dublin didn't pick up on the parade until 1931. Now, St. Pat, I hate to tell you guys, he was not Irish. He was actually Roman, of Roman parentage, from either Scotland or Wales. That's what the historians say. He got captured at the age 16. He was a slave, you know. Him and, who's the other guy? Frederick Douglass. He was a slave. They brought him to Northern Ireland. He was a sheep herder. He vanished. When he was 22, he said, see you later. He went over there back to England, studied priesthood, returned to Ireland when he was, I don't know, 24 or so. And contrary to popular belief, folks, the tale of snakes. You know about the snakes?
He drove the snakes out of Ireland, right?
Did he?
Well, there weren't any, right?
There never was any snakes
You
in
know why?
Ireland. Yeah, you're
Too
right.
cold.
You know
You got
why?
it.
It was too cold. Yeah.
Right.
But what he was referring to were the pagans. Pagans apparently were considered the snakes.
Hey, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
I refer to some of the snakes that rove around this city, and it's pretty cold around here, too.
Well, we have a caller. How are you, caller? Get it up there. When will the snowbanks be removed so that we can park and reach meet? That's a good point, Angie.
I would say you don't have to pay. We're going to give you a free ride.
That's not going to happen.
Is that on the schedule, by the way? Is that part of the removal process?
Not, I haven't seen it anywhere in the budget.
I would
We
say
don't
that,
have the money
I
to
would
do
say
it.
that this late in the year,
Right.
you're going to rely on the melt, right?
They're going
right.
to rely on the
Yeah,
temperature?
in a week, it'll be,
Hopefully it'll be
Gone.
all gone, right? Yeah.
Okay. But on the critical corners, that's the other thing that bothered me.
Yeah.
You know, some of these snowbanks are up so high you can't see a thing. There are certain
if,
critical...
if there's a corner somewhere, you can let your ward councilor know, call 598-4000, ask for the city council office, or you can call the DPW. It'll probably get done quicker if you go through the city council. So 598-4000, ask for Terry or Lisa in the city council office, and they'll be more than willing to help you.
Okay, Ann, I hope you got that. If there's a problem in your area, get a hold of your ward councilor, as the council president referred,
Yep.
and see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's get back to part 2 of our dear Irish friends. Now, originally, St. Patrick's Day was a religious holiday in Ireland. From 1903, and I have 79 there, but it should have been 1970. Consequently, all pubs were closed. Can you believe that? It was a dry holiday. Now, in 1970, SEER, being part of the administration, decided to reclassify that religious holiday into a national holiday to the cheer of the pub owners, who are now open to serve pints of beer to the celebrants. But, you like that one, huh? You did a nice job on that. Pre-19th century, blue was the color of St. Patrick, not green. That's not a little fact. St. Patrick used the shamrock to teach and explain the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, which is a nice analogy. Polly,
Yes.
you can forget your shamrock. That's not the sign of the Irish people. That's not the symbol of the Irish people, you Irishmen. Took an Italian to let you know the harp is your real symbol. Did
It's
you know
on
that?
every single can of Guinness.
What?
What, the
The
hop?
hop.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is
it
that
is
why?
the symbol,
I
yeah.
never thought of that. Is that the derogatory for the Irish people when they call them a hop?
Yep.
You're kidding. I never
That's
never
it.
thought of that.
Yeah.
But that is the,
Well, and what do they call you guys? They called you wops, right?
yeah. You know,
Pretty
without
close to
papers.
us.
Without papers,
Yeah,
right.
without papers.
Yeah.
We have other names too, not too good. Folks, people are too sensitive today. But I really never knew that. That's a good point.
Yeah.
But the actual symbol, or national symbol of the Irish people, is the hop, not the not the
Right.
shamrock.
Yep.
Now listen to this, folks. This is a classic. There are 34 million Irish or partially Irish or exclusively Irish folks in the United States of America, as opposed to 4.2 in Ireland. I'd say you guys reproduce pretty good in the United States. It was fertile ground for you, including, not that I am, but my children can claim Irish ancestry.
Well, you know, Irish were predominantly Catholic, right?
Yes?
And back then there wasn't any Planned Parenthood.
But Paul, let me say this to you. The Irish, and you know, this historically, were more discriminated against than anybody, including some folks that came
Right.
over slaves. I mean, they took a beating.
But if you
I
take
mean,
a
a
look
real
at
beating.
if you take a look at every mayor from the previous one before Curley, who was Rose Kennedy's father, every mayor from there all the way up until Menino was Irish.
In Boston. Yeah.
In
They had to
Boston.
be. That's the only way they could preserve themselves.
Yeah.
They were getting
But prior
slaughtered.
to that, they were old Yankees.
Yeah.
And then you had Menino that broke the patent, and now you have a Irish mayor again in Boston.
Well, here's the deal. Prior to that, the Yanks run the show.
Yep.
And they weren't too fond of those Catholic, low-life Irish folks
You
that
know who
escaped
built
the people.
Fenway Park? An Irishman. That's right.
Who was the guy that I brought up in a shows past that fascinated me? You remember his name? He was the boss of Ward 4, or, you know, the ward boss. What was his name? Lomansky? Was it Lomansky?
Where, in Boston?
Yeah, I think it was Lomansky. Folks, if you remember, it was Lomansky, and he's the one that coined the expressions. I forget what, I have to go back on that. If you can find that in the background, Pedro, throw it up there. His name was Lomansky, and he fought with Kennedy all the time, with Mayor, the grandfather of the Kennedys, and he didn't vote for FDR. He was a proponent of, guess who? Huey Long. This guy was fascinating.
Well,
Get back-
can I just say that I remember reading it, I don't remember where, but there was the idea that the Irish ran for public office after a while when they got here versus the Italians did not, it was a language issue, right?
Exactly, yeah.
You know, the Irish
Could
you know,
speak English,
could
yeah.
speak English, and that made all
But
the
that goes the
difference.
same for like other groups, whether they be the original. Wait, folks, here's an interesting fact, now that you brought it up. The Irish came here, they didn't have 2 nickels or dimes. I mean, they landed here poor. You know, they were escaping the Pato famine.
Right.
Similarly, the Italians that came over here didn't have nickels or dimes either. Few did. Early on in history, the Italians who came here, this is pre-turn of the century, in the 1800s, they had money. So they ended up in California with the vineyards, Napa Valley, okay? It's a different issue. The Germans had a satchel full of money when they came over here, so they bought all that land that was available in the Midwest, and they became
Minnesota.
Schlitz, Miller, you know, so they had a lot of money. But the Irish could never escape the coast. And most of your Italians and the Jews who came over here were very poor, Polish. So they got caught in Boston,
New York.
the coasters in New York, Baltimore, and stuff like that. So if you take a look at how far they accomplished, and when you have 34 million folks, that's a tenth of the population of the United States that has some level or degree of Irish in them. That's a pretty interesting stat, you know?
It's 10 times.
And a lot of good accomplishments.
Ireland,
You know, so, I mean, the fact that I went to BC, don't hold that against me. You know, that was a
It's an Irish
pretty
Catholic
good
school.
Irish Jesuit school. Lastly, St. Patrick died at Waterford, Ireland on March 17th, 461. So that's why we commemorate it. When we get back from this break, by the way, we're going to talk about a tip line, and I'd like you guys to comment on it. It's an idea from Jarrett Nicholson, and it has some merit. So, is it time to go? Yeah, we'll be right back. We'll get a minute. So comment on your Irish ancestry, my dear friend. Who's Irish? Your mother?
My
100?
mother, well, my grandmother on my father's side, and my grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side.
So where did this French guy come in here, that strong guy?
See?
Yeah.
Well, Canadian French. My father's, it dates back, it's pretty old, over 800 years ago is how far back the name goes.
The Seer.
Yeah.
From Canada?
Yep, and there was 4 or 5 different ways back in France.
Right.
And there's, I believe, 4 or 5 different ways of spelling it. And I just recently found out that Saint Cyr came from Cyr, when I always thought it was the other way. So, yeah, it
Plus-
means teacher too.
Well, what's fascinating is the strongest man ever, his name was Seer. We talked about that on the
Louis
last show.
Cyr, right.
Paulie, you're part Greek.
Yes.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah, well, you could talk to my grandparents about that.
About that? I think it's time for that break. We'll be back with our new segment. Stay tuned.
Once you shoot your first needle, you become feeble. Your body begins to ache and deteriorate. If you don't seek help fast, your inner voice will wheedle you into doing worse than that.
Calls me googly eyes.
You know you're beautiful, right? You know that?
Even you are beautiful. I got bullied for wearing glasses. Share if you're against bullying.
We put it out there, just took off. 3 million people have shared this post. Don't let bullies get you down. I stand with you. My whole family's wearing glasses. I wear glasses and I'm proud.
I even have the army on my team.
All the kind comments brought my child joy. I don't feel thank you is enough.
That's
Once upon a time, there were 3 on this set. Now there's 2. Paul Crowley had to do business. Like this, he got an emergency phone call, and that's what we like, response. Like you were mentioning, if you have a problem in Award 3, call Darren Sayre.
Yep.
That's the way it goes.
Yep.
We're going to go to a tip line, Darren, and this was proposed or recommended by Jarrett Mickelson, who thinks that a tip line is a worthwhile recommendation offered in a report by MASC, which I believe stands for Mass Association of School Committees, to identify problems before they become a real threat. They're proposing early intervention, counseling, as critical tools for preventing school violence. Problematic, however, is that mental health issues, once one becomes 18, they can deny them. That's what happened to that kid down in Florida.
Right.
When he turned 18, he said, see you later, I don't want any more. And
Yep. But you want to know something? Even though that happened, that he refused to help, there was still a lot of people that were calling in tips to the FBI, to the police, to other authorities, and they didn't really react in a manner that could have prevented this. So I think, like, if you go back to 9/11,
Right.
people didn't take terrorism as seriously as they did after 9/11. So the phrase after that was, if you see something, say
Report
something.
it, yeah.
So it's the same thing here. I think Jared's right on the money with proposing this.
Yeah, I mean, everything's helpful.
Yep.
And we're going to set up, I believe the police are going to set up a line,
Mm-hmm.
and if we put that number up there, it's TIP, tip
Yep.
411.
Yep.
So if you feel that something may be of this nature, bing, fire
Right.
it out there.
Yep.
But the key is what you just said. It's okay to get the information, then you got to act upon
Then you got to act upon it. And I think people now being so close to what just happened and all the other stuff that's going on in the country that they're going to take things a lot more seriously than they do, you know. And I think people are more apt to pick up the phone and say something rather than go face to face.
Yeah.
And no matter what you're thinking, always go with your gut feeling. If you feel like something's wrong, it probably is. Even if it isn't, at least it's good to be, you know.
You know, this is one of the things that I like about people who are, you know, not afraid to talk reality. I have found, and you just said it, I have found in my life, which has been fairly long, that if I go with my gut rather than my head, I'm usually right.
Yep.
My head deceives me far more than
All
my
the
gut.
time. Yep.
You find that?
All the time. Every single time that I said I should have done this, feeling it in my gut, later on, I'm always kicking myself because I didn't go with my gut. So I totally agree.
Speaking of that, I didn't get the flu shot. I should have went with what you said, my head.
Yep.
Awful. We have a few things coming up. Let me give you the phone number here, folks. It's 781-780-9460. Give us a buzz, and we'll be more than happy to try to answer your question. You have a lot on your plate coming up. The 27th is on the, is it on the pot piles?
Yeah, on the pot.
And what today is what? Today is the 15th.
15th, yeah.
So that's 12 days from now.
Right.
So you're going to have a public hearing on that. And I think you have mixed feelings because on the one hand, it's what the people of the city went voted on.
Right.
It's state law.
Yep.
You're mandated pretty much to provide for 6 locations.
Right.
And that's tricky.
Yep. It's 8 actually, but we already have 2, so we got to come up with 6 more. And you're right, it is tricky. So every ward councilor has to take a look, excluding Peter Capano because he already has 2 in his
Well,
ward.
he's got 2 already, the medical
He's got
ones,
2.
right?
And, you know, Ward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all have to, and Ward 7, all have to take a look at it and try to pick an area, you know, using common sense and fairness. And that's a tough thing to do because a lot of people aren't going to want that type of store in their backyard out of fear.
Right.
And I can use this as an example. There's one over in Salem. It's been there now for at least 4 years. You wouldn't even know it's there. You wouldn't even know it's there. It doesn't bring in the element that everybody thinks it's going to bring in. It's a unassuming building, and you pull into the parking lot, and you have to have an ID to get in. And right now you need a doctor's prescription as well to get in. If you went with your spouse, she couldn't go in. You could go in if you had the prescription, but she'd have to stay outside and
That's
wait.
for medical marijuana, right?
Right.
But for the parlors,
Yep, you have to be 21.
that's all.
That's it.
And they can come from anywhere. Don't
You
have
can
to be
come
Lynn
from
residents.
anywhere, right.
But here's, I don't know, I have serious reservations about this because it's a little different than alcohol. We haven't really tested this out. We don't
Right.
have any history on it. So I suppose. What you said about Salem may be true, but it may not be true in the city of Lynn. You already have restrictions built in and ordinances that prevent establishments like pot piles from being anywhere near a school, or I suppose a religious entity.
The schools, parks, daycare, and the problem with that is that you wouldn't be able to open one up in Lynn. So it would become challengeable in a court of law, and we'd lose that in a court of law. So we're going to have to lower the restricted areas.
So why would that be challengeable in court? I mean,
Because that would mean that you wouldn't be able to open up a pot parlor or a store where you can sell.
I think any reasonable person would say that such an establishment should not be anywhere near a school.
Right, right.
Now, parks are a different issue,
Yep.
and I can make, you know, but schools in particular.
Yep. Well, when you take a look at Lynn, and for the population that it has, and the size of the city, and I'm going to use this Peabody, compared to Peabody. Peabody has a third of the population that Lynn has.
Right.
But we're a third of the size of what Peabody is in square miles.
Geographically, yeah.
So there are, I believe there's 27 schools, and that's not including KIPP, and it's not including the school that's up off of Euclid Ave.
Yeah, the Christian school.
There's Christian school. There's probably about, in St. Pius,
St. Mary's?
St. Mary's. So you probably have like 35 or 40 schools that are in the city. You got to have at least 50 daycares.
Yes.
In the city. Then when you start breaking down the parks, so they would not be able to open. Every few hundred feet, you have one of those restrictions, whether it's a park or a school or a daycare or a church.
We said it was going to be tricky.
Right. Because you got to remember, when Lynn was built, there wasn't cars.
No, you're right.
Everybody was walking. And then as the world progressed, you took transit, buses or trains.
What do you think the most densely populated city, town in Massachusetts is? I never knew this, by the way.
Nahat.
Not bad. It's actually Chelsea.
Okay.
I never realized that because it has a very narrow,
Yep.
heavily densely populated.
Right.
Lynn is pretty dense too.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, people don't realize Lynn is 11 square miles,
Yeah.
roughly. Swampscott's only 3 square miles.
Right.
They're
But they
fairly-
only have like maybe 20,000 people that live there.
Yeah, less. But that's fairly dense.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd think that it looks like it has a lot of green space,
Right.
but it doesn't.
But you take a look at, and I'll use Ward 3 as an example, just registered voters, close to 8,000 registered voters, and it's the smallest ward in the city. That's not including all the kids that live here. You know, and you're talking about from the beach to where CVS is on Eastern
Yeah.
Ave, from the Swampscott line to Goldfish Pond, and then it cuts over to Chatham Street.
But it's very, very compressed.
Very narrow.
Caller, what's going to happen to the old Marshall? That's a good question for you, to the old Marshall School, now that the offer to turn it into housing was turned down. That's a real
Yeah.
good question.
Well, what we're doing is we have to sit down with the school committee and the superintendent. There is the need and the possibility that one or two of our elementary schools are in very poor condition, and they may have to be replaced. So and we're going to have an area where we can house those kids when those schools are being replaced. And the only place that we have is the old cafeteria at Marshall. So we may have to hold on to it. We're going to have to take another look at it.
Well, you know, that's applying
Yeah.
what you can do the best with.
Right.
Interestingly, I was at an affair a week ago tonight, and Charlie Baker came in and then Paul Crowley threw a little fundraiser, and I ran into 2 individuals who introduced themselves to me for reasons I do not know, who are co-developers, I guess you call them, at the Beacon Hill site.
Yep.
And their complaint to me was, you know, I said, when is this going to happen? They said, regulations are killing us.
It's the state.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. It's because you're building on the water.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to invest so many dollars into recreational use for the public, and they're meeting all those criterias, but the DEP and everybody want to make sure that as they're pulling the permits, that they're not going to have an impact on the ocean. There's a wall they have to build, a retaining wall to keep them back from the ocean, you know, the water and stuff. So it is unfortunate. I mean, they're still pretty much on target, but the regulations, it slows everything down.
Isn't this
Government
exactly,
red
I
tape.
mean, this is exactly, whether you like or dislike the current president, but his whole point of getting rid of all these regulations is done massive good things for the economy overall.
Yep.
And I suspect this is what he was talking about. As a builder, he understood that some of these regulations are just insane.
Right, and that's the problem. It's like there's no medium, no fair ground. You got one group over here, one group, and I'm not talking about because of Republican
Yeah.
and Democrat. I'm talking about and I don't mean any
An environmentalist.
environmentalists on this side who want everything for what they believe in. Then you have the builders and the contractors over here who want every restriction eliminated.
And you're in the middle.
And I'm stuck in the middle.
You're the guy they're shooting arrows at.
Right, yeah, all the time, both sides.
That's life.
Nobody wants to see change. When you see a developer trying to...
Let me say something else that you brought up. It's an interesting fact. This is not my original idea, folks, but it's fascinating to me. You mentioned a retaining wall that has to be built. The former mayors of the city of Lynn, I had on the show a while back, and they mentioned that the problem with the Lynn Harbor and development there is it's susceptible to a tsunami. Is that how you pronounce it?
Right.
Because there's no way of a big wave being broken. So before you can do anything on that harbor, you have to build islands or break barriers. That makes sense to you?
Yep, yep.
I never realized this.
Yep.
And you have to bring in the Corps of Engineers to dredge the harbor, too,
Right.
for pathways.
Right.
And then you could do some real development there. Has anybody thought about that?
The mayor and the congressman, Senator McGee, when Tommy was, the mayor was a senator, they worked on this dredging that's going to take place. Jamie Marsh from Community Development, back in December, one of the last acts that Judy did was sign off on a grant so that they could start the dredging of the Lynn Harbor.
That's an important thing, is it not, for Lynn, for
Yeah,
development?
a lot of different people worked on it, from the federal level all the way down to the local level, and it took a few years, and it's going to be
Going to happen?
going to happen. Yeah.
That's to keep us updated on that, will you please?
Yep.
Because I think that's critical to developing that whole harbor site. Because
It
if you can bring
definitely
boats in,
is. Yep.
and if you can build those little islands like they said, and I think these former mayors are resources that people should pay attention to.
Right.
They've been there.
And we got to be really careful, because in the next 50 to 100 years, the sea level here is going to rise between 8 and 10 feet.
Oh,
So any building that we do, especially along, the ocean, you have to build everything above ground to a certain level. In Hawaii, a lot of places, they have to build 18 feet off the ground
oh, please.
because of the ocean.
Because, yeah.
8 feet down in Florida. So,
Hey, I drove by after the storm, and the waves were coming in
Yeah.
like you couldn't believe, splashing over the wall.
and if you notice all the new construction that's taken place down along Revere Beach, what's on the first floor? Parking.
Exactly.
And what they're doing is they're making the facade of the building look like that first floor is part of the upper
Let the
part
cars
of the
get
building.
drenched. We're going to take a break. We'll be back. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Lynn Community Television, your local media center. Here, we have great resources and staff to help create your own content.
Hi, I'm Jim Carrigan, host of The American Dream. I'm also a member of Lynn Community TV, and I want to encourage everybody out there who's not a member of Lynn Community TV to join the group. We have a lot of fun down here. The studio is new and it's in fabulous
Things
condition.
provided to our members are state-of-the-art studio, video and audio equipment, editing space, and a full-on training session with a staff member.
I've been involved in access television for over 20 years. Our shows have gone out to tens of thousands of people in local communities and millions throughout the world. Come on down, learn how to use the equipment to promote whatever it is you're doing.
For more information, please visit our website at www.lyntv.org, give us a call, or come on down to the station at 181 Union Street in Lynn.
And we're back. Our number here is 781-780-9460. I believe we have a caller. Let's put that up. With Union Hospital leaving, do you think any other hospital would consider coming to Lynn? That's another good question. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I would love to see another hospital
I'm sure
come
you
to
would.
Lynn.
But is there any
But
possibility of that?
there's always a possibility, but I believe that Lynn Hospital has already begun the process so they can start to build their urgent care unit. They're going to be coming in front of the city to ask us to rezone 5 acres of land for them to do that. And I really do believe that after they get this facility built, that people are going to like having the way it's set up. And they're also going to like the setup at Salem Hospital.
That's the medical village concept, right?
Right.
That leaves you 15 acres.
Yep.
I proposed putting a school there.
Yep.
But Ann has a good point. Since that facility, they're not going to knock the hospital down, are they?
Well, Union
thinking of
Hospital is
that?
saying there's a plan to knock it down and do some type of business on the first floor with some type of residency above it.
So they're going to go commercial with the 15 acres left over.
Well, not all, the whole 15 acres on the Linfield Street side where the hospital is right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be a developer that comes in, takes a look at the building, and comes up with a plan to keep the building as well,
And retrofit it.
and retrofit it, correct.
But there's no possibility, for example, is there any competition in the medical health field? For example, we have Leahy Hospital
Right.
and others. They would not be interested in.
Well, I just saw that, I think Leahy's one of the hospitals, they're joining in with 3 or 4 other hospitals, and they're going to become the second largest provider of medical, stuff in Massachusetts. So right now, Partners is for profit, Leahy's not for profit.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they are for profit.
By the way, are you going to spring training? I mean,
Nope,
is this
I
a
figured-
sign of spring training?
Green for St. Patty's
I got
Day,
it.
Red Sox for spring training.
You love baseball.
I
Always
like
have.
football better, but I do like baseball, yep.
Well, apparently you're a sportster, though.
Yeah.
We have an interesting situation here. It's called Tale of Two Democrats by yours truly, Joseph Espina. This is my weekly take a shot at Moulton. Now, Moulton is all up, he's all giddy about the fact that it appears, because it's not definite, that a fellow named Connor Lamb won in the greater Pittsburgh area. Now, here's the problem. Moulton is pro-choice, he's pro-gun restrictions, he's anti-terror, and he's anti-Trump tax bill. Lamb is pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-tariff, and pro-Trump tax cuts. In fact, Connor Lamb, he ran as a Republican.
But he's a Democrat.
And he's a Democrat.
Right.
So my point to you folks out there is, that's the Democrat I used to be. That's the Democrat you are, to be honest with you.
Yep, pretty much.
What is known as not conservative, middle of the road type of guy that likes to be in his jeans with the Red Sox, thing on. He's not running around in a, Neiman Marcus suit or anything like that. He's a regular type of guy, but is reasonable. Moulton is thinking he's going to be president of the United States. He's running all over the place. I mean, give me a break, will you please? It's funny. I think Paul Crowley would be a Democrat all over again if he was like Connor Lamb. And I think he's the formula for the future of the Democratic Party, if you want to know the truth.
Yep. Yeah, I think, but both parties have gone,
Way off to the ends.
it's unbelievable.
I agree with you.
And I would like to see a lot more, I wish somebody would start a party of common sense and fairness.
Thank you very much.
That's it.
That's it.
Everybody's treated equally, treated fairly, and common sense is used in the decision
Look,
making.
you and I both know that tip line is not the cure-all. But what is it? It's a step in a positive direction, just like you pointed out.
Right.
Put it in line, people get sensitive to it, and they use it, and we may just get lucky.
Yep.
So why rail against it?
Right.
I mean, I agree with, tariff. I don't know if tariffs are a good thing or a bad thing. Technically, I tend to think that protecting and bringing steel back into the United States and aluminum back in the United States is a smart idea from a national...
It creates jobs.
And it creates jobs. But from a national security perspective, we should produce our own steel.
Right. We send the raw product over to the other countries, and they send back the finished product.
The finished product.
So, I mean, if we can keep, I don't see how they're sending it back cheaper than what we can make it for, to be honest with you.
That's because they're dumping and subsidizing it. And look under the present paradigm that we have, trade agreements, we happen to be almost wait a minute, more than that. We're on almost $1 trillion in the dink on our trade deficit, right? Mm-hmm. So we're in effect exporting our labor, our wealth to these other countries.
Yep.
The globalists love that.
Yep.
Donald Trump doesn't like that.
Right.
And so what he's trying to say is, wait a second, let's bring this back for the working guy. The General Electric took a hike.
Yep.
I'd like to see the General Electric come back again, if you want to know the truth.
I'd love to see the General Electric come back.
We talked about this last week.
Yep.
Darren, folks, do you realize 92%, was that the figure? 92% of the revenue that comes into the city comes from homeowners, not from business.
Right, yep.
That's a bad equation.
Yep. Back 15 years ago, the GE had over 10,000 people that were working there. And that facilities was responsible for well over 100,000 jobs in the surrounding area. Everything from spin-offs, machine shops, contractors, different, carpenters, electricians, pipe fitters, steam fitters, just all the different restaurants there were. I mean, we have a different class of restaurant in Lynn today than we did back then, but most of them were Bill's Lunch. Perfect example. Benny's, another place.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many places back then that you could go to, but everybody knew everybody, and things have changed a lot in the last 15 years.
This is before your time. Mm-hmm. But folks out there, I'm giving away my age, but Johnny Joyce's, I don't know if you remember Johnny Joyce's.
I do, the ham, and I know the recipe.
For the chopped ham?
Yep.
They had the best chopped ham ever.
99-cent sandwiches. And Skip Bohannon tried to mimic it. He never was able to. Balloon
Can't
Boutique.
Do it.
Nope.
I want that recipe, by the way. And there were a lot of places like that. Victoria Diner in West Lynn, and there was a terrific little Greek place on Andrew Street.
Ronnie's on Eastern Ave. Yeah, everywhere. There was.
We don't have that much time left, so let's get to a couple of these comments. There's one by Larry McCulley, and he said that the 10-year loan will cost $1.4 million in interest on each year's budget for the next 10 years. Half of the deficit for next year. Is that accurate?
It's a 1.4 payment, not 1.4 interest.
I got you.
So, and it's a 10-year loan. We can pay it off faster if we can. We're not going to be overriding 2.5 or anything like that. If you have to go above that, that has to go out to the public for a vote.
So the cumulative is, the worst case scenario is 1.4, but it can be less if you pay the loan off quicker.
Right.
So that's basically it.
Exactly.
Next week we're going to get into, and I hope we can get into the superintendent, because that's going to be a critical issue. And I feel that you should involve yourself along with the school committee and the mayor, because that's such a critical issue. It impacts what you have to do as a city council. See, folks, they can't do anything with the budget. You can only approve it or not approve it, correct?
Well, we can cut.
You can cut.
And if we cut, there are consequences if we cut. And if we don't approve it, there are even bigger consequences. So our backs are against the wall. At least now, because of all the budget issues that we have a mayor who is really willing to work with us. And we've been involved right from the beginning of the process, everything.
That's a good thing.
It's great.
So if we include the school department, which is critical to our budget, that's 50% of the budget,
it's a little bit more, actually. But
then we're on to the right track. And the superintendent of school is critical to helping you work on that budget.
Right. The superintendent, and the reason why the state wanted it to be so that we could go to a bigger field of candidates for that, so they weren't restrictive to residency. They oversee the biggest part of the budget, even more than the mayor does. But
Yep.
the mayor is the chairman of the school committee, so it's a pretty big responsibility.
On that note, on responsibility, tune into next week as we take up some more responsibility. For now, have a great St. Patrick's Day. Not too much beer, but that corned beef and cabbage, oh, yummy.